Good evening, listeners. We are coming to you live from Chicago and Alaska on the 23rd of February. The year of our Lord is 2017. And Casey will be introducing and reading her two excerpts for this. I don't even know what number we're on episode, but we're in the double digits, so it's legitimate.
Well, we started over, so this is season 2,
episode 2. So, Casey, what have you brought for us today?
So the theme for today is herbal remedies.
It's a very good winter theme.
And Year of Our Lord is like appropriate, I think, for setting the temporality and the notions of time maybe at play in these works. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm drinking of the cocoa bean and also the chocolate bean. Are those the coffee bean and the cocoa bean? Those are herbs. Those are herbal.
Right? They're from plants. Yes,
they're from plants.
Yeah.
Good. So I'm totally ready. Then take it away.
Okay. Well, I'm having hops, which, if taken in large quantities, can up estrogen levels in men and decrease their libido. So be careful to those.
That Budweiser commercial.
Sponsored by Budweiser. We should mention that our podcast is sponsored by Budweiser. How's that not come up yet?
I don't know, but we're rolling away from what we're here for, as we always do.
No. Hops are a plant. Beer is made from plants, as is whatever you're drinking. So anyway, very in keeping with the theme. All right, are you ready?
Yes.
Christopher was an herbalist, and all sorts of people came to see him. People came with tortuous coughs. He gave them ground wheat with barley flour that he mixed with honey. Sometimes some boiled farro, too, because farro draws moisture from the lungs. Depending on the type of cough, he might give pea soup or water from boiled turnips. Christopher differentiated coughs by sound. If the cough was indistinct and didn't lend itself to definition, Christopher pressed his ear to the patient's chest and listened to his breathing for a long time. Christopher also helped with bedroom matters. He immediately identified visitors with these concerns based on how they entered and hesitated at the door. Their tragic and guilty gaze amused Christopher, but he did not let that show. Sometimes he sent them to wash in the next room, for he was convinced the rules of personal hygiene should be upheld, even in the Middle Ages. If there was no erection, Christopher suggested supplementing meals with expensive anise and almond, or an inexpensive mint syrup. All increase the seed and promote bedroom thoughts. The same was attributed to the plant with the unusual name of livelong, as well as to simple wheat. Finally, there was also hare's ear, which had 2 roots, white and black. An erection would arise from using white, but vanish with black. The drawback to this method was that the white had to be held in the mouth at the crucial moment. Not everyone was willing to do that. Christopher did not exactly believe in herbs. More likely, he believed God's help would come through any herb for a specific matter, just as that help comes through people. Both are but instruments. He did not ponder why each of the herbs he knew was associated with strictly defined qualities. He considered that question frivolous. Christopher's help to his fellow man was not limited to medicine. He was convinced the mysterious effects of herbs spread through all aspects of human life. It was known to Christopher that the plant Thistle, its roots as light as wax, brought success. He gave it to commercial traders so that they might be received with honor and rise to great glory wherever they might go. Only be not proud beyond means, Christopher warned them, for pride is the root of all sin. He gave Thistle only to those of whom he was absolutely certain. More than anything, Christopher loved a red plant, known as the Tsar's eyes, or round-leaved sundew, that was about the height of a needle. He always had it with him. He knew that it was good to have some on his person when beginning any matter. Bring it to court, for example, so as not to be convicted. Or sit at a banquet with it, and fear not the heretic lying in wait for anyone who lets his guard down. Christopher did not like heretics. He recognized them using Adam's head, also known as mandrake. When gathering this plant near the marshes, he blessed himself with the sign of the cross and the words, "Have mercy upon me, O God." For jealous spouses, Christopher recommended duckweed, though not the duckweed that covers marshes, but the dark blue plant that spreads on land. It should be placed at the head of the bed by the wife. When she falls asleep, she will tell everything about herself on her own, the good and the bad. There was another method, too, for compelling her to start talking. Owl heart. It was to be applied to a sleeping woman's heart. Few people took that step, though. It was frightening. Christopher himself had no need for these remedies because his wife had died 30 years before. And that's the end of the first excerpt.
Okay.
Questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
Is this Christopher of the Middle Ages a member of the church, or is he a private practitioner?
He's not.
Is he Brother Christopher?
No, he's not Brother Christopher. No.
Okay.
He's an herbalist.
Okay.
Good question.
He's what? Okay.
Okay. Story 2. Or excerpt.
Story two. Excerpt 2.
It really sets the scene. Thank you.
We're back.
Come an NFL training session. This is what happened when you drink caffeine.
It does have that extra shot of espresso that I told you about.
Yeah, that's that. Okay, story 2. Let's all calm down and go back to nature and back into the past. When picking basil, Francisco held each leaf to his nose briefly and rubbed it before placing it in the basket. If anyone had ever pointed out his womanly indulgence, he would have felt ashamed, but the gardener said nothing. Perhaps they presumed that Francisco was testing the quality of the basil, a notoriously mercurial plant. Told its rejuvenating properties, others claimed the mere scent of the leaves brought misfortune upon them. The latter liked to point out that basil would not grow next to rue, and everyone knew rue did not tolerate poisons. Towards the end of the summer, a rumor began circulating among the stable hands that the marigolds growing around the fens had fallen under the protection of a terrible kind of bat. Prince, skeptical as men of their profession are inclined to be, maintained that the story had been invented by the villagers to raise the price. In those days, the supply of marigolds was a matter of serious concern. Marigold petals were used to ease the pains of ulcers and the pains of aging ladies, and to dye those same ladies' graying hair a pleasing shade of yellow, the thought to protect against the pestilence. When the rumor reached the ear of the condottiero, he summoned Francisco. "Go to the fens," he told Francisco, "and bring as many petals and leaves as you can carry without attracting attention. If you encounter anyone on your way home, say nothing to contradict the rumor of the bats," he added. "For though we are innocent of the sin of malicious gossip, I see not why we should fail to reap some benefit. Giving these mendacious villagers of what they thought to gain through falsehood and the terrorizing of women, we shall see them doubly punished for their sins." Francisco was more wary of the kind of person he would encounter alone on the road than either terrible bats or fraudulent commercial practices. But he said nothing. He showed his compliance in a bow that curved his head down and green-cloaked shoulders inwards. For a moment, the condottiero was reminded of a large, soft basil leaf ready to be plucked. At mid-morning the following day, Francisco bid his daughter farewell and crossed the threshold of the outer gate, heading in the direction of the fens. He raised his eyes to the horizon and then briefly to the heavens. All around him in every direction he saw countryside under a cloudless sky. Francisco felt exhilarated, but also decidedly ill at ease. The empty space extended away from him, generous and inviting, but also towards and at him, made of nothing. It was as if the open landscape itself, no longer held in check by the familiar walls and tidy orchards of the condottiero's estate, could now at last rush in upon and over him. And to anchor himself, Francisco did what he had done his whole life. He cast his eyes earthwards. His gaze rested hold of a peony, which, he found himself reciting, prevents the mocking delusions that the fawns bring us in our sleep. Scanning the earth along the wayside, he saw lion's teeth, used to clear heat and toxins from the blood. Years ago, during the last outbreak of the pestilence, he had applied the herb's wet, fresh leaves to the boils of the condottiero's plague-stricken daughter. Francisco continued walking along the road, his eyes fixed ever on the ground. He spotted Elecampane with the spirit sustain, and all manner of wild mint, of which Wilfrid of Strabo had written, "If any man can name all the properties of mint, he must know how many fish swim in the Indian Ocean." Francisco, fearful of not returning before nightfall, hurried along, only stopping long enough to pick from the drying earth a Valerian plant, known to calm the troubles of the mind. He put his cloak near his heart. It would be his reward to himself for his services to the condottiero. The end of that excerpt.
Okay, cool. So I like both of these very much, and I like them partly because I think that they incorporate, I don't want to say how nature, but I want to say specifically how the relationship between people and plants is kind of linked to so many other things, especially historically. So in both stories, you have how different people, and I think these times are both, they focus on a similar time, which is around like the Middle Ages, somewhere in there, and how people in that time who had knowledge of plants were kind of healers, but they did a multitude of trades. But this relationship that they have with plants, where it connects them to like plague outbreaks and how they're treated with plants versus how like the kind of very superstitious element so inherent to that time, when they would use them kind of in like potions, or this plant will give you this response when consumed by this person versus this plant. And I mean, it's how I guess how people started really first using drugs. Well, not first. I'm sure they used them earlier than that too. But before they thought of it as science, I guess these plants are so tied in with kind of the religious fears and superstitions of an era, and then you can tie that in turn with the political intrigues with the religion of the time. I don't know. So the whole topic, it has so many different branches, and it's very fascinating. So I'm really glad that you chose this topic.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you put it that way. I think that is kind of like why I find this topic also like really fascinating, because it's not about the plants, although I'm quite fond of the names of the plants. Like I think I could just read like a list of herbs and their folk names and just be it's like a poem. And then the properties and the things that have been said about them have this incredibly poetic appeal. It's just the pleasure of the sound and the associations and the images. But like you said, like the plants are kind of a source or a connecting point that a particular angle on a human world, on its and also on a spiritual world, or how a spiritual world was conceived. So they're about a way of understanding like the divine, understanding like kind of one's purpose in the world, and they're also a way about interacting with other human beings. And then, as you said, there's like a political element and a commercial element as well. So all of these different aspects of human existence kind of like these little leaves basically, which is cool. So yeah, I would agree with that assessment.
No, it's very cool. I just think that it's more, it happens today too. I mean, just look at like the pharmaceutical industry is basically, you know, a monk from the year 1094 who just has like this one garden and has figured out all these different recipes for what to do with the plants, but they're much more expensive. And he's patented all of it.
I think that's one of the things that I find, and I'm not saying that you know, drugs that you get at a pharmacy or from a doctor are all bad and evil or anything like that. Like that's not my take on it at all. I think a lot of them are very helpful and necessary, but there's an ideology to science too. There's this sense of like they're infallible and they have this absolute decisive role. and you don't know what's in it, and it's all kind of a mystery, and you just kind of function based on faith. Like it's just as faith-based as it ever was before. But with perhaps more dangers. I mean, you could do a lot of damage with prescribing the wrong medicinal plant as well.
Right, and you've removed kind of the natural world from it. So there's a difference between, well, here are these leaves, chew on them, versus here is this pill that is like just a clear white powder. It could be any substance or any combination of things, and there's no association between like what it was extracted from where it's really coming from. So in that sense, it's even more kind of superstitious and bizarre than what it used to be, which was, you know, you have, this is the plant and this is its name, and I will combine them for these reasons, which don't really make any sense, but at least you're kind of following my logic to it. And so, yeah, I mean, the how that has evolved, which isn't necessarily, I mean, that's not what you're going for with either of these stories.
It's an important aspect, I think, still.
Yes. But no, these were two very cool excerpts. So in the first one, Christopher, how he applied different herbal remedies to listening to people's coughs versus their body language showing whether or not they were having sexual problems. I don't know. There's that very there's the clear connection. It's and then again, I'm referencing what we talked about before, which isn't quite what you were going for these stories, but it was a very reactive kind of organic dynamic between man and nature and sensing and kind of that going back and forth in order to solve a problem, versus how kind of abstracted it is now. Where you go to a doctor and say, oh, this pill makes me feel this, but this pill makes me feel that, and in this combination, they're like, okay, we'll try these different pills. It's different.
Well, I think what's interesting, and it's not necessarily about sharing Christopher's beliefs or celebrating the Catholic Church or anything, but that there's a certain innocence about like and faith that is like viewed very positively, and that I kind of found refreshing, because there's many things you can say against like religion, and there are many criticisms that can be made, and there's definitely lots of criticisms to be made about medieval cures, like, I mean, leeches, and we didn't really get into that as much.
Yeah.
Really a great thing. So there's lots of things that were done incorrectly. Then there's the witch hunts. There's many issues, but I think that this is like you see it as something that's like very ethical and simple. Like there's a sense of like a kind of a pious person, which I thought was interesting that you asked if he was like a man of the church.
Yeah, well,
because there's something profoundly pious about his behavior.
Yeah, and have you ever, what was it, Brother Cadfael?
Yes, I was totally thinking.
I love that show. That was really cool. I was definitely thinking about that during both of these excerpts. It was making me think I needed to watch that show again, which I haven't seen it in years.
Well, it makes sense though, because like one of the things that that the doctor, and especially the pre-modern doctor or pre-20th century doctor, one of the things that makes him a very frequent actually literary protagonist, or I guess, yeah, protagonist is I guess a sufficient word, is because doctors have access to so many dimensions of human and social existence. So like these very intimate things are laid bare to them, and on this like level of trust. So they know everyone's secrets.
Yeah.
Very good at observing. So like the detective aspect in the case of Brother Cadfael is very natural. Like of course he would know, because he's used to paying minute attention to like the world around him, which could be the natural world, or it could be, a mysterious death.
Yeah, that was a genius. That was a genius show, and I think that the things that I loved about it were definitely captured here. And you could go at these in so many different directions too. And again, I'm referencing the first one, Christopher and his use of certain herbal remedies and his dislike of heretics. And then there's the inevitable, as the male doctor is more trusted here, and I mean, witchcraft is associated with, I think, women who understood how these things sort of worked, or at least thought that they did. But their practice of it, or midwifery, was highly associated with heretical thought and witchcraft and curses and hexes and those kinds of things. Whereas it was the man of God, or at least somebody who was more associated with the church and male, has a different relationship with these plants when we think about it.
Yeah, and more authority and so forth. That's true. The witch angle is something interesting, and if I developed one of these into something longer, that would be something that I would like to explore, because the gendered aspect of there was a notion of herb wives. That was kind of a disparaging term, like when modern medicine was starting to take off and there was more scientific, rigorous experiments being done with different kind of plants and their effects. Like the herb wives were spoken of very dismissively as anyone who just kind of like was like, here, take this garlic or this weird potion or something like that.
Garlic is so good for you, though.
I never
even heard of that term.
For 5,000 years, garlic has been used medicinally.
Mm-hmm. It's been a long time.
And I learned in researching one of these that the ancient Egyptians had also their cures, and one of them was some of them that still kind of makes sense is for fussy children, they gave them poppies.
Put them in a drug like
that would work.
Yeah, I mean, have you read Amy Stewart's The Drunken Botanist?
No.
You'd like it.
It's recommended.
It's recommended. It's really just her telling you how all of these different forms of alcohol, really all forms of alcohol, as we kind of talked about when we first started this episode, come from different plants, and how those came to be. But at the end of each little section, it gives you like an awesome cocktail or something you can make with that particular beverage. Is pretty cool. So maybe once you and your sig fig are done with this diet, you could purchase a copy of Amy Stewart's The Drunken Botanist and go to town.
I'll be down. I might ask Joel, actually, our brother, because he's all about the cocktails. So that's how he's expressing his botanical tendencies these days. Anyway,
I'm a little jealous that I haven't been able to sample that yet. But moving on to the second excerpt that you read with Francisco the gardener and his womanly indulgences of rubbing basil between his fingers, which I didn't realize was womanly, but I would totally do that because basil smells really delicious. I wanted to clarify something with that one. So when I was listening, I wasn't sure if you were modulating your tone, like speaking more deliberately slowly at points and then reading faster, or if that was because our internet connection is a little spotty. I wanted to make sure. Did you actually do that a couple times?
Because I naturally speak quickly. Sometimes I'll remember and I'll slow down. I think it frequently has to do with if the sentence is difficult, or if I'm like, oh right, I should speak slower. So it's just random self-aware moments.
Okay. No, because it sounded, I wasn't sure if you were reading it as though the narrator was being like affected by some drug and would go off on an acid trip and then speed up again. And I was like,
yeah, I know. I mean, if it was that extreme, then maybe there was an internet question.
Okay, that was just.
I hope not. I hope I'm not that bad at reading.
No, I was. It only happened a couple of times, but it kind of influenced how I absorbed that story as well. I was like, I think that the narrator is supposed to be like high at points on some medieval drug potion combination. Well, I mean, and it added a whole new subtext for me.
He's whereas Christopher's kind of in a tranquil state, and we just kind of know like an everyday situation, and there's no sense of time really in the first one. Like this is a specific day with a specific events, and without giving too much additional context, like Francisco has do you want backstory?
Well, no, actually there was a good amount of backstory with the Francisco one, which is why I wonder if I should guess now which one of these I think you wrote. I will say, because there's definitely more of a plot provided in the second excerpt than in the first one, and that's something that I did, unless you're just tricking me and using the same quote unquote mistake I made where I put too much thought into my excerpt because I couldn't help myself. In which case you win.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a plot, but something happens, whereas nothing really happens.
You want to give more because it's really cool what's going on in your head. But I'm going to guess that you wrote the second one. Also, there was some comment in about mint in it that sounded very you, and I thought was hysterical. Did you write the second one?
Oh, really? Well, it's actually, so I did write the second one.
Okay.
But all right, so the second one I really am going to make into like an actual novel.
You should, because it's cool.
So I would really like it. I have a whole like, usually I have ideas on the train in the morning, and that's the only time I have like actual ideas. The rest is just sort of like busy work.
Gobbledygook.
So I have my 20 minutes of like actual thought. Anyway, so I have a whole story about Francisco or him and another person, I haven't decided yet, who were in like, let's say like 16th century here.
Okay.
So the kind of the end of the city states in Italy, or in a fluctuating state of city states in Italy. They're the southern Italy is under Spanish occupation, as is the New World. And at some point in this like major colonial expansion, basically this person very young is kind of imported as like a slave or a servant in Europe, and he ends up in Italy, and that's where he kind of grows up. So he's a foreigner. And so the idea was that I wanted someone who was Latin America and the US to a certain extent has a tradition of like these scientific expeditions where people would go, you know, European Germans or French or British Europeans would go and like, you know, pick up specimens of things and record them and send them back and expand scientific knowledge. And this is part of a process of like power and knowledge and conquest and things like that. And I wanted to see what it would be like to take a person from the New World and have them do like an expedition, like a scientific spontaneous expedition in like Europe or like in some place that's like a colonial power. So I thought to like remove the power aspect and just have them be like, oh, wow, I'm totally disoriented and I have no idea what's going on. Look at that plant.
I love that
idea.
That would be really fun, right?
I think it would be. And I have an herbal book that I've been reading, like a novel every day. It's like it has pictures and it tells me how to make all these kinds of things, and I'm learning about stuff. But it has quotes from various famous herbal books that were published. You know, Pliny has one, and then there's like subsequent ones in the 15th and 16th century, kind of on the cusp of the modern era. So they have lots of like fun little comments and theories, and they're quite poetic at certain points. But one of them that I like is the mint one, for example, is a quote from that herb book that I bought. It's just like a basic intro to herbal remedies, and Wilfrid of Strabo wrote in the 12th century that if any man can name all the properties of mint, he must know how many fish swim in the Indian Ocean. I thought it was beautiful. Like, it's awesome. Like if you know all about mint, that's how much you know, because mint is that.
Mint is all, because mint is everything.
There are lots of and there's lots of types of mint and stuff.
There's a plant that's, I think it's called the chocolate mint. I don't know what its Latin name is, but it tastes exactly like chocolate mint.
Oh, I think I've heard about this. This might be a bread grafted one. But anyway, so that's the idea. And then the condottiero is like a late, they're like kind of, they're nobility, but they're also merchants. So I wanted to inflect a more like they're doing a trade in like these plants. And then Francisco, who's kind of like this terse little fellow. And I think the weakness of this excerpt in comparison to the Christopher piece is that you get a very clear sense of what Christopher is like, even in that passage. And Francisco's character hasn't truly like been formed yet. So it doesn't grab you in the same way because there's other things going on.
Well, yeah, it's more about the story itself, and he's a key figure in it, but he's kind of an enigma as presented in the excerpt. Whereas, and what is the first one an excerpt from?
Oh my God! So it's from an excerpt from the best novel that I've read in like 10 years probably. I hope I didn't tell you about it because I was trying to restrain myself because I knew I wanted to use it. It's called Laurus, and
Okay.
it's a Russian novel. It's a medieval Russian novel, and I don't want to tell you too much because I kind of want you to read it. But
Well,
what I read,
I don't read it. I don't read Russian or
it's
Spanish.
translated. It's translated.
Okay, I would read a translation in
Yeah,
English.
no. I read a translation. My Russian is like pretty rusty, and I wouldn't really get through like a 300-page novel, and a lot of it is medieval because it is set in the Middle Ages.
Mm-hmm.
Although
I hope you got this for me for my birthday.
Well, all right. Well, I wanted to see if you. I almost did. All right. So it was in my Amazon cart, and I was like, I'm gonna get Hannah this for her birthday. And I was like, what if I read this? And then she's like, yeah, I don't really like that. And then it'll be too late. So I can get that would be like. So I have something for you now that's on its way, but I can get you this too, and then it'll be like 2 books for her birthday. So that's good. I'll get it to you. Oh, yeah, this will be my birthday present for my birthday to you.
You can get my 27, my 28 in one fell swoop, as it were. Although I'm not gonna lie, I still need to get. I need to get your 30. 30?
I have no idea.
You're turning 30?
Well, no, I think I'm turning 32.
32.
I'm a little rough. I know I'm not as old as Jesus yet, so
Okay.
that's how I'm tracking.
You are younger than most things on planet Earth. Still.
That's true, but I'm also made of matter that's been around for billions of years. If we wanted to go that direction, but yeah. So Laurus is actually Christopher is the grandfather of the protagonist. This is very early on, and the protagonist, whose name is Arseny, is he becomes a healer, and then he becomes kind of a holy fool. This is a very important character in like Slavic, Eastern European literature and folklore of like someone who's like even innocent and kind of doesn't manage material wealth or people that well, but on the other end has like these great, almost divine abilities and insights and stuff. So he's a healer. He's a doctor. He's mostly known as a doctor, and it's his kind of extended pilgrimage. But there are certain moments that depart from like the medieval era because ultimately it's about healing, it's about death, and because it's about the Middle Ages. So the Middle Ages means constant proximity to death, but it's very, very beautiful. And then it has like these meditations on time and stuff. And I don't want to say anything more than that. But
Okay.
it's very beautiful. All the sentences are quite short. That was the hardest thing because I naturally write like very, very long sentences. So I kept trying to clip mine to mirror that, and I still couldn't. Laurus, it's by Eugene Volatskin. I want to say Vodolazkin. So yeah, it's a sad. It has sad moments, but it also has kind of and I think just the beauty of the book and the it has a tone like nothing else I've ever read.
Mm-hmm.
Like it puts you in a you know how you read certain things and you'll be like very sensitive afterwards.
Yeah.
It simplifies and it goes to the essential, and you just become very, very sensitive, and you also kind of feel like you are in the Middle Ages, which is very hard to do because they are like very remote. And you do get this like the atmosphere. Have you ever read anything by Tolstoy?
Yeah, Tolstoy is difficult for me. Not difficult to read, he can be difficult to get into. But when I do, it's awesome. But usually it's only like a couple passages within a much longer piece of his writing.
Well, this isn't like stylistically that much like him, but I think of Tolstoy with this example of like with mentioning two things, you have a sense of how everyone looks and what's going on and what the weather is like, and you get all these sensorial impressions. So like this art of picking just the right details, which is like if you write anything, you know that's like the hardest thing to do. Is to pick the right details without being like, well, this leaf looked like that, then another leaf looked like that, and then she had blue eyes and blonde hair and arched eyebrows and like all this extra info that's just like tedious. So yeah. He doesn't do that. He's very good at picking like just the right. And there's a pathos to it, and the characters are like you learn about them as they go along because you don't really have a lot of like super interior moments. It's kind of so anyway. He's a professor of medieval Russian literature, I think, that wrote it. But it's been very acclaimed, and it's gotten rave reviews by everyone. I think it came out like 2 or 3 years ago, the translation. So.
Well, it sounds beautiful, and I would love to read it. And yes, but yes, that I'm definitely going to take that book recommendation. And I enjoyed both of these excerpts quite a bit, and I'm excited to plant my herb garden once the ground is not frozen where I am located at. So,
dude, I'll tell you some useful herbs because you can, like, things like mugwort and all kinds of stuff that you can use and get, like, some of them like make your body produce more adrenaline, and like you could get a lot of natural highs if you wanted to just do recreational herbal medicine.
I'm all about natural highs.
Yeah, no, the herb thing is fascinating. In the Francisco one, in the second one, the quote, there was a rumor about cinnamon in the original one, but it is said that the cinnamon growing around the marshes had fallen under the protection of terrible kind of bats, but that this story had been invented by natives to raise the price. Like, that's basically something that Pliny the Elder says in his like treatise on herbal medicine. Like, it's just got these outrageous, outlandish descriptions.
That's really cool. No, that's really cool.
I know, right?
That.
What a great way
that's
to
an awesome detail. Yeah, man.
Surrounded by
I want my house to fall. Yeah, surrounded by terrible hordes of bats. My house is surrounded by hordes of moose. Did I tell you that I was trying to? Oh, all right, well, maybe we should cut the episode. I'm about to go into very unrelated topic.
Finish the.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was backing out of my house, and there was a baby moose. A baby moose here being defined as a 700 to 800 pound moose. Right, he was chewing over a mailbox. Half of his body was in the road, which means the road was completely backed up. And we're staring at it, taking pictures. And then we turn and we see Mama Moose. Mama Moose is like almost twice as large as Baby Moose, and she's just staring at us, like waiting for us to do something. And so this thing could like bust my car in half. I have my little Scion TC. So over the snow, I slowly back up my car and turn around. But the snow's been pushed so high on our road that there's a drop of almost 3 feet to get from our road to the highway that's connected. So I can't get out that way. I have to go the other way. So I turn around again, and the moose is still in the road, but it's looking at me. So I'm like, move, baby, because if I honk my horn, Mom is going to freak out. And then the baby slowly crossed the street. And then I slowly drive by, and the Mama Moose is staring me down, like, as I drive. She just keeps watching my car. So that was a cool but terrifying moment.
That is terrifying. Oh my God. You were attacked by like an ancient giant mastodon with horns, basically. Is how
so
what I heard.
That's what it felt like. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
We'll set up there.
They didn't actually hit my car. Mm.
All right, so and watch out for moose.
Watch out for moose.